Welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Today, we're heading over to New Zealand and looking at one of their oils that doesn't get the attention that Manuka does. Sounds like it though. Kānuka. How are you, Liz?
I'm all right. I've had an interesting night, though. Definitely lots of rabbit holes thinking about this one. I'm going to bust a few backstage secrets in that normally we record these on Friday, but Adam decided to give me 1 day's notice and said, can you change? And you may remember if you watched the dill one, he had thought, right, I'm doing kunzia on the day we were, on Kānuka on the day we were doing dill, and I hadn't revised it. And so literally it's 1 day. And I was saying to Adam actually earlier that I learned about Kānuka way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, when I qualified 30 years ago. But it's never been an oil. I'm not going to say it's not an oil that I use. It is an oil that I use a lot, but I always use it in tandem with Manuka and Kānuka. And I've never even considered using it alone. So that was the challenge for me to have. I was like, I can't even remember what the chemistry is. So I had to look that up. But then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole with kunzia and got a bit confused about that. So tell me a little bit about the kunzia Kānuka thing. Let's talk about that first, I think.
Yeah, so if we look at their Latin names, both what is commonly known as Kānuka, which is in New Zealand, is its Latin name is Kunzia. You're going to have to help me on the pronunciations of these ones.
I would say it's Ericoides.
Ericoides. Whereas what is commonly sold in Australia as an Australian essential oil is Kunzia ambigua. So if you've got something that says Kunzia on it, I would say you've probably got Kunzia ambigua. But if you've got something labelled Kānuka, you've probably got Kunzia Ericoides. I'll get it by the end of the session. Yeah. So they're obviously related somehow. They've been separated a long, long time ago when the ocean came up between Australia and New Zealand. But the interesting thing is, like we often say, Manuka, Kānuka, they're so close together, but Manuka is actually part of the Leptospermum family, and Kānuka is part of the Kunzia family. So they're not brother and sister, they're more cousins, aren't they?
They are, and when I qualified, Kānuka was classified as a leptospermum. I can't exactly remember what the full Latin name was, but it was a leptospermum. And I'm guessing that it changed about 10 years ago, but my Latin names are always focused on the ones I know. It's not something that comes naturally to me, so it's out of my awareness. And I don't even know why they reclassified it. But interestingly, Jennifer P. Shrines actually says something that I had known but had forgotten, that it's called white tea tree because it acts very similarly to tea tree, and it's a close relative as well. And certainly when I was taught, that was like the magical tandem that we thought was going to change hospital MRSA and stuff. Manuka, Kānuka, tea tree, that combination. But then, just to give background, I think I talked a bit about it in the Manuka one. It did in petri dishes, but then when it came to working in like the larger public, blood always gets in the way and screws things over, really. And it didn't turn out to be the kind of blanket remedy that we were hoping that it would be. But outside of that, it hasn't really come into my consciousness, which is disappointing because I've missed a massive opportunity, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I feel quite sad today. After reading about a trial in Jennifer's book, I was like, oh my goodness. I shrieked with despair when I read it. So I'll talk about that in a bit. But I think the interesting thing about it is that it's really high in alpha-pinene. And as regular people who watch this or listen to us know, I'm a bit of an alpha-pinene geek. I'm so excited by the things that people are learning that this constituent can do. Everybody else gets excited about 1,8-cineol, and I'm just like, no, we're so last week. That is alpha-pinene is so much more. And this is where, we're looking at around about between 40, 50, sometimes 60% alpha-pinene, which is really, really high. And it's such an important molecule for pain, particularly. I talk about this, I'm sure everybody will go, oh, I know what she's going to say now, but I am going to say it in case nobody's watched it before, that it is, it's been proven to act on a cell called chondrocytes. So chondrocytes are the building blocks, the foundation blocks to collagen. And collagen, of course, supports our skin, our muscles, our bones, but most important from the point of view of alpha-pinene, and it's this classification that's really driving the experimentation and the research, is the discs that sit between the vertebrae in osteoarthritis. So it's a degenerative condition because the chondrocytes die. However, they've now proven that alpha-pinene actually encourages chondrocytes to start living again and multiplying and to start bringing back collagen and hopefully regenerating discs. So for people who have such a painful condition, I've actually got two very close personal friends who really suffer from osteoarthritis, and I know you're not supposed to say suffer now, you're supposed to say live with, because it's punished a positive mindset, and that's all exactly right, but they do suffer. And this feeling of there being no cushioning anymore between the vertebrae, of them rubbing against each other, the lack of flexibility, it really draws down their fatigue. They really get exhausted. They have problems with pacing themselves, because some days only the smallest exertion will wipe them out for days. And it's this pain, it's this rubbing. So alpha-pinene, oils in alpha-pinene are so important for this condition. Also, they are alpha-pinene works on nociceptors. Again, it's something that I talk about a lot. Nociception is the signaling that goes from the body to the brain. I won't break it down today because I've done it in lots of recent articles, but how it moves through the body, how the body fibromyalgia is a really good example. Like a feather-light touch is only very light to most of us, but their pain conditioning through their nerve cells, through their nociceptors, is so wired up that even that will be painful. And I'm always very careful to say very clearly that what I'm not saying that pain is in the head, but it is a neurological condition that the wiring has gone haywire. And alpha-pinene, again, helps to bring that down. So really helps to balance nerve signaling, pain signaling. What's interesting too is I love to look at the emotional sides of oils. And as I say, this isn't really one that I work with very often. And we've talked about how Kunzia and Kānuka are not the same thing. But Kunzia ambigua, which is the other oil, really interesting thing that Robbie Zeck's written about it. And I felt when I was working with the oil that actually it seems to have that same component. And she says, pain and cries. And so here we go. So Kunzia, bear in mind, this is Kānuka, not Kunzia. Kunzia also helps to diffuse deep emotional pain that has grown solid as a result of suppression. Creating internal blocks in the body's meridian system. Pain and crisis are part of the human cycle and mindful awareness that can transform pain. Pain in the body indicates there is something wrong. Pain can also activate growth as a potential for healing. Pain is often the opening through which you can learn to trust yourself and see yourself differently. And that is part of what I was talking about, people who with pacing with chronic pain, how they distrust their body. They go, I can't do that because tomorrow I will really struggle. And so this idea of the alpha-pinene in the oil is very good at being able to transmute this. Because think about do you have pine trees in Australia?
Not natively, but there's the British have brought a few over throughout the decades.
Right. So actually our local forest should be oaks, but because of the Industrial Revolution, the oaks were all taken out. So we live amongst pines everywhere here. And the whole thing of walking into a pine forest just goes, leave it all behind. You can just walk freely. And that is alpha-pinning working on the brain. You know, it's really saying, forget where you are, forget, just be. So I think that's really interesting, that component. So I will talk also, I've talked a little bit about the clinical trials. I kind of brushed over it, but massive antimicrobial abilities in Kānuka and Manuka. And as I say, the two together are really, really good. I talked earlier about how I had a shriek of pain. So I would say I've got lots of books out. The only person that really writes a lot about Kānuka is this book, which is Jennifer P. Shrine. So Jennifer, if you're watching, thank you. As ever, this book is magnificent. So page 483 in 2009, Maddox Jennings et al. Conducted a randomized placebo-controlled feasibility study to evaluate the effects of Manuka Kānuka essential on radiotherapy-induced mucositis. The oils were mixed into a mouthwash at a 1-to-1 in water. The individuals in the mouthwash group had a delayed onset of mucositis and reduced pain and oral symptoms compared with the placebo water and control, which is the standard care groups. And it was acknowledged that the small sample size of just 19 individuals was a limiting factor that precluded any definitive conclusions. It did appear that the mouthwash had given a beneficial effect, even although research was required. However, given that there is no treatment for this uncomfortable and debilitating side effect of radiotherapy, it would appear to be a safe and positive intervention. So the reason why I shrieked was my poor husband had horrific mucositis, literally the worst they'd ever seen in the hospital, because he was having radiotherapy right on his mouth. So to give context to that, so that hopefully anybody who watches this will trigger for future generations who are witnessing this. So the first thing that happened was he lost his sense of taste. And then the next day he said that the texture of everything felt like glass in his mouth, and he just couldn't eat anything. It just felt like shards of glass. The next morning we woke up, and he does have a bit of a like that naturally anyway, but because his jaw's gone, it's lots, so he sits like that, and the hole here was just like lemon yellow in a huge big blister, and it was full of pus. So what happens with mucositis is it's a condition of the saliva glands, and as you can imagine, that saliva glands are all over your mouth, and imagine that everyone is inflamed. You can imagine how painful that is. But the inflammation then thickens the mucus, so it no longer moisturizes the mouth. So what happens is they feel like they have a very, very dry mouth, and they start to choke on the mucus because there's so much of it in the mouth all the time. They can't get rid of it. They can't swallow it because their throat is inflamed from the radiotherapy, but also because it's too thick to swallow. So imagine having the worst cold ever. You can imagine how thick snot goes when that's in the mouth. So that is mucositis. So I can't speak to this because I didn't do this, because I didn't know about this. But if this happens to somebody that you know, the recommendation according to the trial, Maddox and Jennings, is to use Manuka and Kānuka together in a 1-to-1 ratio in water. So no alcohol or anything like that. So it's not diluted. It's the water's just being used as a conduit and to flush it round the mouth. So upsetting. I cannot tell you how upsetting it is to read this, but I really hope that somebody from this video remembers this in the future and goes, oh my goodness, I know what I've got to try and do here. So Kānuka for radiotherapy mucositis.
Do you think with that application of Kānuka and Manuka in the mouth, other mouth and oral challenges could be good as well?
Oh yeah, like things like mouth ulcers and stuff like that, and abscesses maybe is the word. Yeah, I would say so. And any kind of like situation where there's an antimicrobial condition, so we've got a bit of an infection going on. Don't forget that I've said antinociceptic. That's why it's helping the mucositis, anti-inflammatory, so it's bringing that down. But importantly, helping bring the pain down. And as you can imagine, maybe can't, so I'll put it back into perspective again. When somebody has radiotherapy, they have it for every day, or Daryl had it every day for 5 days over 6 weeks. So it just continues to get worse, and it's right in your mouth. It's like having toothache. It's relentless, isn't it? So to have something that can switch down the pain signaling is really powerful. I can't tell you how much I wish I'd known this, because I can really see how it was worked. But I said to Daryl, I don't even know what it was about Kānuka that made them go, oh, let's try that. Because I would never have gone there in my head. Even now, knowing what I'd done, that would not have been the oil that I'd chosen. For reference, what I did try and do is get him to drink chamomile tea, but he just went, it tastes disgusting. I said, oh, you couldn't taste anything. So you might have that again, even though they've got no taste. They might go, they don't like the taste. There's definitely an element of that. But yeah, I would say any kind of condition where there's kind of a possible infection going on in the mouth, or oral complaints, I would definitely give it a go from the pain-killing point of view as much as anything else.
So as I sat here and listened to you, I'm kind of getting this idea that it's kind of like a tea tree and antimicrobial tea tree kind of properties, but also has this great pain relief aspect to it as well. Would that be right in saying that that's kind of two powers combined?
So yeah, I would say that's accurate. I would say it was pine on crack, to be honest.
Yeah, amazing. So that was the other thing I wanted to ask about. Now I'm going to give you another second to geek out about alpha pinene. You said somewhere between 40 and 60% alpha pinene in Kānuka. How does that compare to other high alpha pinene essential oils like maybe pine or frankincense or so on?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Off the top,
wait a minute.
off the top of your head.
Pine, I would say it was. Yeah, I was. So I would. You should ask me. Tell me you're going to ask these questions. I would say that it was probably comparative to pine.
Okay.
But it also has like a level of 1,8 cineol in it, which pine doesn't have. So you have that other layer of like the tea tree eucalyptus stuff going on. I would say it was much higher than frankincense, but without checking my notes. Okay, my brain's saying a third higher, but I might be making that up. But yeah, okay. I would say it was comparable with pine.
So we're kind of getting this love child between tea tree, pine, and eucalyptus. Would that be fair to say?
No, the 1,8 cineol is not high enough to make it a eucalyptus love child, but it's there. It's low enough not to worry about it for kids.
Got you. Yep. And could be great for maybe chest infections.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it's it is quite a diverse and interesting oil, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah. And last week we were kind of unpacking honey myrtle and how that was quite amazing in the chemistry, and I guess we're kind of coming to the same kind of conclusion with Kānuka as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it was really interesting actually, because in some ways this project is easy for me. I can just turn up and just like, because my brain holds serious amounts of shit about shit, I can just like turn up and spout it. But that database wasn't there. But then I said to Adam, I went to sleep, and then my brain just went, here you go, here's 30 years of non-study that you haven't done, and just dumped it on me. And I woke up and I was like, oh wow, I definitely need to go there and do more of that work. So that's interesting. But I also think it's very interesting how it's coming back into my awareness after a long time. I think when we're talking about like spiritual connections to oils, I think it's interesting to kind of just like look at your shelves and not even occupy your brain with it, and just go, well, what am I drawn to? And I never get drawn to that oil ever. But then suddenly you highlight it, you bring it into my awareness, and I'm like, oh my goodness, look at the opportunities I've missed. And that makes me a bit like, oh, I need to get that information in, you know. But so yeah, it's quite interesting. These oils are definitely teaching me things about myself on a different level. I found that last week with honey myrtle, and I found it again this week with this one on other levels as well. But when we talk about the emotional spiritual, I'll go on to that. But yeah, it's very strange how that, like, I'm definitely tapping into a different aspect of the oils to what I was before.
Interesting. And let's talk a little bit about the spiritual, because one of the things that really not upsets me, but I don't like lumping oils together. You can lump oils together, like you can lump citruses together, for example, when you're looking at chemistry. That's fine. But I'd really like to try and, how can we stretch these out? Especially, they each need to have their spiritual niche. So when Kānuka first came into my life, I'm like, right, you're not just going to be the second brother or second sister of Manuka. Speak to me. And I spent a lot of time with it. So the thing that really came, I find Kānuka I would personify it as being a more feminine oil rather than a masculine oil. I find it gentle. But when I say gentle, this is not kind of Roman chamomile gentle. It's that gentle strength again. And the real element that really came up is, for me, with Kānuka, is to do around when we make a mistake. First of all, let me talk on a personal level. When we make a mistake, we have two options. We can basically pretend it didn't happen, deny it, avoid it, and kind of shrink away. Or what Kānuka, I find, actually helps you to do is to own up to that and make amends. Now, really good on a personal level, because we hate being wrong. But even the podcast I was listening to this morning with Mel Robbins, there was this constant talk about, and we hear it. I'm not the first person to say this, but when we're living a full life, we're making mistakes. We're stuffing up. We're doing things wrong because we're out there, we're giving it a shot. But it's about embracing those mistakes and taking responsibility from those mistakes, learning from them, but also if we caused harm, fixing that up. And Kānuka almost gives you the humility and the courage to own your mistakes and to then go, how can I fix that? Now, this kind of then blew out to a more of a global thing. And I think about what has happened to indigenous cultures around the world with white settlers. And New Zealand is definitely no exception. And I find this is a really great oil to help. There is a lot of healing happening we see around the world now, where white settlers have come in to an indigenous land, have done a lot of damage, culturally have upset the indigenous culture. And now we're trying to live together. And I think Kānuka is this beautiful heart chakra essential oil that can help people to admit their mistakes and move on from them, but also not hold grudges for mistakes in the point where you need to keep on punishing people, even a future generation. Can we all work together to move on together? Now, this kind of really came true as well. And I'm jumping countries here, but there's been a lot of prophecies that there would be a time when we would need to unite. And most people are probably most familiar with the ones that the prophecies from North America. And one famous one is that there would be a time when a white buffalo or bison would be born. And this would be a time when, the earth was in chaos, the birds were falling out of the sky, the fish were dying in the rivers, and this would be the moment that we'd all need to come together to save Mother Earth. Now, in 1994, a white buffalo by the name of Snowflake was born. And since then, there has not only been just more white buffaloes, but there's actually been more and more white animals born around the world. And in fact, I was actually at a wildlife park and there's some white kangaroos there as well. Now, I want you to think about white animals for a second. White animals in the wild are taking a risk. They're sticking their neck out because they lose their ability to camouflage. So they're susceptible to predators and so on. So, like they are incarnating in that white form to bring humanity a message, they are almost encouraging us to step out, take a risk, and that we need to be the messengers from Mother Earth as well. And I feel you can wrap Kānuka all around this kind of theme of moving forward, making amends, fixing things how they are, and moving us into this new era. So it's such an amazing oil for owning the past and making amends for the future without dragging grudges generation upon generation, and really helping us as an individual stand up with an empowered heart and go, hey, we need to make some changes. I need to stick my neck out. I need to be the leader or the trendsetter or the one of the first people to do that. And on a daily basis, just working with Kānuka, diffusing it, anointing it on your heart chakra. I find it's a really great one for helping just bring awareness of what you can do as an individual. It's a really, really nice one for helping to sometimes the idea that we've got to save the world can be a little bit overwhelming. And Kānuka can really almost bring a bit of peace and just going, just do what you can today. Just be the best person you can, tread a little bit more lightly on the earth, make a better food choice, make a better choice of, what you do with your rubbish, and bit by bit, we can all heal together as, becoming a culture of very much diversity. And also we can all come together to heal Mother Earth as well. And that's where I think Kānuka is a pivotal oil.
Wow, that was lovely. I'm fascinated too about these white buffaloes. I keep seeing the post saying people saying, "Oh, there's been another one born," and I just think it's a really beautiful prophecy. And as one of the world's whitest creatures, I'm enjoying seeing this renaissance of albino creatures. I agree with all of that. Like I said, I don't have a huge database of knowledge around this, but I did spend some time working with it last night. And just inhaling it, I was aware that my breathing changed quite remarkably. So bearing in mind that it's a chest infection oil, and I think you're absolutely correct in what you say, a heart chakra oil. I have had some issues, personal issues that are make me aware that I am stressed quite a lot of the time. And for me, I can only speak to myself, but I suspect that this is probably a common thing. When I'm stressed, I breathe from the wrong place. So I found that I was breathing here, and as I made a conscious effort to let my breathing drop, the Kānuka took it right down, which is feels so good for anxiety. Suddenly you feel like, oh, I've got space to breathe. And one of the things that is causing me stress, I have to be careful because I don't want the two people to think they're causing me stress, because they're not. But I've got two friends who are independently being in conditions that are like very difficult with other people close to them. So they feel smothered. One in particular has got somebody who just is like almost like her shadow, and she's taking that to me. And every time this person speaks, she's like, sends me a message. So, whoa. Whoa. Yeah, any idea how much you're reflecting? Step back. But the other one had a very difficult friendship with somebody that's gone very sour, and it's really affected her ability to trust people. And so the slightest thing, she makes her frightened that there's a betrayal, so that she comes. And then I have my own issue of somebody who can be incredibly smothering. So this is like a definite thing that's going on in my consciousness at the moment, this dynamics between what are you supposed to do for somebody and when do you make them stand on their own 2 feet. And particularly for me, this is difficult because I have this very strong conditioning that if you're somebody's friend, you just support them regardless. And that is correct until you have nothing left yourself, And so what's interesting about this oil, I think, is it made me suddenly realise, God, I've got this space to breathe. What am I going to do with that space? Am I going to let other people come into that space? Oh, and it was like a real clear vision of how you're going to maintain that boundary and keep that space. And just that sort of that conversation that went on in my head of, right, you just give yourself a bit of space and just work out where those boundaries are. I thought it was really interesting because it was like a whole written book that just happened in one breath, if you know what I mean. And given that, we're talking about also radiotherapy makes the mucositis makes your mouth feels like it's gone very small as well. So that's interesting that there's like this my life becomes small. Osteoarthritis, the worry about pain makes your life small. And that feeling of walking through the trees in the forest will always have that expansive nature. So I thought that was really, really interesting. What was also interesting was the book that you recommended last week by Alan Clay.
Yes.
What is it? New Planets, New Stars, is that right?
I think it is,
What's
yeah. It's about the 10 new dwarf planets we're having a bit of a chat about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I should have had it in front of me, but it's on my Kindle, so that doesn't work in my head. But so there was one particular god who was an Indian god, a Hindu god, Varuga, whatever said it right. Varuna. Higher octave of Jupiter. I was like, that's exactly what that feels like. That feeling of expansion and then further expansion and boundaries and how far you can go. When I was reading his explanation, that was exactly his explanation, that you work very hard learning to do something so you become a real wise sage in that area. So whether that's like on a personal process or in a spiritual process, or in my case, process, I suppose, that people come to you with that info to ask you for that information, but at some point you have to go, wait a minute, if I give you all that information, then how do you learn from that? You don't learn about learning. Do you know what I mean? And that was exactly, I was like, whoa, that's exactly two of those situations. That is what I'm doing. And they were talking about how there is like this sense of learning to just let it be. Say, oh, that's interesting. Let me know when you find out. And I was like, nobody ever taught me that words. So those two pieces of wisdom, the book about these new dwarf planets and the oil, really spoke to one another. I thought it was really exciting. So that's my rulership. Okay.
Varuna. Yeah. So you'd give it to Varuna. See, I'm at the moment it's with Venus, but I think we're both getting into that book and we're both kind of diving in, and I think like we kind of found last week that honey myrtle when we spoke about that. Oops, sorry, I'm knocking my tripod. That we, these are oils of relatively unheard of, relatively unexplored, and even though Kānuka, you learned about it 30 years ago, it didn't come up. It hasn't come up, and it could be this. We're dabbling with ideas, and we may have some workshops coming up later this year about oils of a new consciousness and different things like that. We're just going to tease you with that, but I think Kānuka could be one of them, and I reckon my rulership from Venus is something else, possibly Verona. I'll have to look at that later today. Could match for sure.
Yeah, so I sat down with Mum on Saturday, and obviously I was like regaling all the things that I'd done through the week, and I was saying that he'd recommended this book. And she was like, whoa, how interesting. Be interesting to see how the oils have evolved to match the new planets. And I was like, whoa, never even considered that aspect. And then just when you were talking, I was like, how strange. This oil moved classification. Something about it actually made somebody go, that's not what I thought it was like.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And I think you made this link, but just to reiterate it, if Varuna is a higher octave or a higher vibration than Jupiter, and Jupiter is obviously about expansion, then Varuna is about spaciousness, yeah?
Yeah, it's about being able to, yeah. So, I mean, I'm so early in this research, I can't really speak to that well. But one thing that struck me was what he'd said was, I really struggle with this word sovereignty. It's thrown around an awful lot in divine feminine stuff, and I'm like, I don't even know what it means. And I think maybe it's because I'm British and our sovereign was a queen. Do you know what I mean? So how do you become the queen? You just don't. But he described it in a different way, and I was like, okay, that's starting to make sense to me now. What he was saying was that a lot of our conditioning comes from teachers and family and social conditioning. But outside of that, suddenly you find something, you go, I'm really interested in that. And you just become like the authority just because you become, well, it becomes your superpower to bring every conversation back to it and just to be so fascinated, and you absorb so much information. And so then you become, and then if you've got the nerve, and one of the things you were saying was if you work with Varuna, one of the things that you could do is to say, right, what am I really good at? How am I going to put that out there? Because that first few times you put it out there, you're like, am I good enough? Am I good enough? And maybe that never goes away. But somebody clicks and goes, okay, actually, they quite know a bit about that. So, for example, now, anything to do with bees, everybody goes, oh, I'll ask Liz or I'll tell Liz as if I know everything there ever was about bees, because I've become like the figurehead of that. And so like Varuna starts at that point. It's like you are at that point. You've made it there. So that's the Jupiter journey. But then what happens when you get to there? Well, then suddenly, for example, somebody will ring and go, oh my God, Sunday morning, I've got 12 different texts about, and this about bees and that about bees and that. And you're like, wait, what? Sundays is not your time. Do you know what I mean? And you're into a whole new challenge, which Jupiter doesn't address. And Varuna goes, I know how to do that. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I want to see if I can tie up Kānuka from a holistic point of view in a tight little tidy box and bow. So you often hear me say that what an oil does physically, it does metaphysically. So would you agree with the fact that Kānuka can be used as an oil to clear away the past, antimicrobial, take away the pain from the past, alpha-pinene, and create spaciousness for new paradigms?
Oh, that is a tidy bow. I think it's too tidy, but yeah, all right. It will do all of those things. Yes, it will do all those things.
Yes. Well, if we're talking about how it heals the past, it, on a personal level and on a cultural level or a country level, it can, reset new boundaries and then create, that what can we do next type of thing. That's where I'm landing by the end of today. And as we said, these new oils, what we're kind of really getting into the point now, we've said this before, we've explored frankincense, we've done lavender, we've looked at rose essential oil, and there is reams of literature and reams of awareness and consciousness on them. But there are other plants. There are 3,000 different plants, maybe more now, that give us an essential oil, and many of them have just not had the attention, not just physically, but on the metaphysical point of view as well. And that's kind of where we're ending up with. We're like, what oil should we talk about next? Aren't we?
Yeah, I think that really speaks to my work over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. What you felt about Manuka and Kānuka is exactly what I feel about frankincense and myrrh. That those two, myrrh needs to be split off, and that's what my book's been doing. But also, when I did the workshop with Debbie Atterby last year, and she came to Ludlow, I was very aware that we work with like eucalyptus all of the time, and rightly so. The First Nations people of Australia protect their wisdom about it. We shouldn't be stealing their wisdom. But likewise, if we are engaging with that oil and we're going to put it on somebody's body, we talked a little bit about this last week when we were talking about, well, why do sometimes I disagree with your chakra placement? If you're going to put that on somebody else's body, you need to be aware of all of the main effects, and you need to be really thinking about that. So if, all right, you're treating a chest infection, but what other things may happen? That awareness needs to be in your psyche, otherwise you're only kind of doing half the job. So yeah, this sort of engagement with foreign plants, I'm kind of on the border really, because I don't want to use loads of carbon air miles to get loads over, but the ones that exist over here and are around lots, I do think we should be thinking more about a spiritual connection than we are.
So the question we've been asking ourselves of late is Kānuka an oil that everyone needs to have in their collection at home? What do you think?
I don't think so. But again, I'm going to stress this is only our opinion, but I think that if I was looking for something that was antimicrobial, it wouldn't be the oil I'd choose. I would go, okay, there's other things. Manuka. If I was thinking, right, I want to make Manuka stronger, then I would get Kānuka to back that up. If I was thinking, if I got a pain condition, or I was somebody who struggles with boundaries, perhaps you're working with somebody who's narcissistic, for example, and it's just like it's not very easy to see the truth, to see the boundaries. I would experiment to see if those could be helpful, yeah. And mucositis, please go for mucositis.
Yes, definitely. Well, hopefully we've done Kānuka justice. We always have these conversations. We're worried that we don't have much content on it, but I think we found some juiciness on it. And I think hopefully we've given some people some insights, but I hope also that we've given some people some thoughts to go and explore themselves as well.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing what the comments on this one. Please leave comments below.
Yes, and I will also put in the description below on both the podcast and the podcast Alan Fay's book. So because we've been referring to it a little bit, and you're probably wondering what on earth we're talking about, check out the link below, and I'll pop it where you can purchase it directly from the author to support him as well. So thank you very much for joining us on Fellowship in Essential Oils. What are we going to look at next week? You'll have to be here to find out. We'll see you then. Take care.
Bye-bye.